Good morning and welcome to Cut Up and Listen, a podcast recorded live at Pagosa Springs Barbershop in downtown Pagosa Springs, Colorado. Good morning. I'm Cade. I'm the owner and I am up early. It's 5 a.m. and yeah, it's raining outside. I have some things that I was going to go do this morning, but it's raining. I mean, it's coming down. I think they were calling up to 3 inches. I'm not sure. I didn't go check the weather. This was the rumor mill in the barbershop this week, but I think they were calling for a couple inches in town. In fact, I got a notice on Facebook that I think the barbershop got tagged in it, that they were offering free sandbags to residents due to the rain and what they were possibly anticipating being maybe some flooding. Anyways, but it's raining outside and it is supposed to rain for 4 or 5 days. So it's awesome fall weather, but it's definitely fall in the mountains now. And I am up early at the house. I was writing some notes before starting this podcast this morning, and I'm going to do an update on my week this week. I was trying to think of what subjects, what to do, and this week the barbershop had 2 deaths occur, not in the shop, but of patrons of the shop that passed away. Mr. John O'Brien passed away, and one of our 94-year-old Mr. Eugene Witkowski, I think I'm saying his last name right, Eugene Witkowski, passed away this week. And so that I attended a funeral yesterday for John O'Brien. In fact, Mr. John was my old neighbor. He used to live around the corner from me in the cul-de-sac behind me, and he and his wife have been super sweet to us. In fact, they have a cute little garden behind their house where my daughters, who are 8 and 4, they used to, when they were real small, go over and they would walk the garden and help Miss Fran, his wife, pick flowers, and Miss Fran would bake cookies. Every year we go caroling over at their house. So we have a connection to him. I have a connection to Mr. John. And then John, we moved homes, and John would continue to come into the barbershop and see me, periodically. And Mr. John would always come in and he would pick on me. He was ex-Navy, and he would kind of pick at me, which I thought was pretty funny. And I'm ex-Navy as well. And so like I said, it'd just be a little bit of a funny back and forth. And then he would always get up and go sweep my barbershop, because I'd never charge him. He was my neighbor, and they're super sweet, And of course, if you saw his hair, you would realize that I wasn't having to do a lot. And he would go grab that broom, sweep the barbershop. Then he would walk around to everybody in the barbershop and tell them about my family. And so it was such a treasured interaction that I got to be part of, by just cutting his house and being his neighbor. So here's to Mr. John O'Brien. It was such a pleasure knowing you. And Mr. Eugene Witkowski was 94 years old. In fact, I asked him last haircut how old he is, and 94. And I've been cutting his hair for 5 or 6 years now, I think, somewhere around that range. So I was thinking about this yesterday, that, Mr. Eugene was probably 88, 89 when I first started cutting his hair. So, now we're at 94. And he would always walk himself in. Now, he might have needed some help, but somebody would bring him and they would book him an appointment online, which, again, I don't know if you know our shop, but our policy is 90 years or older are free. And that's, yeah, I mean, it seems like it makes perfect sense to me that if you're 90, you got hair, and you can get to my barbershop, but you can have it, man. You earned it, dude. It's yours. So Mr. Eugene was probably one of 3, if not 4, 90-year-olds that are in the shop. And I think he was, 94, I think, is the oldest 90s that we have that come get a haircut. But Mr. Eugene wasn't much of a talker. He really couldn't hear too well, but he was a kind guy that would always tell me to take his beard a little bit shorter. And he would probably run me through that 3 times, 4 times each time. And he wasn't a stickler. He wasn't he don't misinterpret how I'm saying this, okay? I'm not trying to pick on him or anything like that, but that is a memory that I remember about Mr. Eugene. In fact, I was even thinking about it last haircut when I was cutting his beard, that he would always feel it. I don't know if you're watching in the video, but he would kind of tug on the end of his beard. And unless as you can probably imagine, it's easier for me to be more respectful of the beard and always go long instead of going short, unless they say, hey man, I just need a number 2 across my face. Okay, well, I know what that is and I know where that link's gonna end. But if somebody just says, hey, take it short, I'm probably gonna be longer than short in respect for that beard. I remember I was saying something one time to my wife about this, this nuance of having to go sometimes do the dance of getting somebody's beard perfectly right. And my wife goes, well, how long do you think it took them to grow that beard? And I had to think about it, that day. And so Mr. Eugene would always let his beard overgrow. He was not, I don't think he was doing a lot of shaving. And so we would take it off the cheeks, and then we would tighten up the beard and the mustache and stuff like that. And so, again, that's one thing I remember about Mr. Eugene. He wouldn't make me do it 4 times, but we might do it 2 or 3 for sure. I think 3 seemed like, a common thing. But like I said, don't misinterpret me saying this in negative regard about Mr. Eugene. It's funny, the quirky things that you'll remember. But I do remember that, he was a kind man who would come in and very briefly interact with me just to kind of get in the chair. But he couldn't hear very well, a small statured man. In fact, referring back to Mr. John O'Brien, Mr. O'Brien would always tell me how much smaller he had gotten over the years. And so it makes me think, it just makes me think. In fact, yesterday I went to Mr. O'Brien's funeral, and of course they had pictures, right? And so I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, he has really lost some weight, through age. But he was a fun man to interact with, and I remember, in fact, I was telling his family, I always remember he would stop by or stop when he was driving past my house. And so I guess that would be probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. He'd stop and I'd be mowing, or we'd be sitting on the porch, and he'd always stop by and never get out of his truck or anything. He'd just stop in the street and, kind of look over at me and go, hey, what you doing? And just kind of give me the elder interaction. I don't know if that makes sense. The elder interaction. Where I'm the young guy, he's the older guy. I'm the one that's doing the work. He's the one that's driving by. I don't know if you got any of them folks in your life, but he was one of them. And so, this week we lost both Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Wachowski. And so, I just wanted to kind of brush up on my week and kind of give you a review. Let's see, what else? I had an interesting conversation with a guy this week that I thought would be fun to convey. I was sitting there chatting with a guy that comes into the barbershop, nice fella. He's probably 10, I would say 15 years my senior. So I would say he's probably somewhere in the north 50s, low 60s range. I don't know if you know me, I'm in my mid 40s. But we got to talking, and I'm trying to think how we started to. Anyways, we got to talk about baseball and hobby, and I used to collect autographs with one of my best friends, Justin, who I was in the Navy with. We used to go to Petco Park in San Diego and do a lot of chasing, getting autographs. In fact, Justin's moved on to bigger and better things now. He has opened a baseball card shop on the West Coast with a group of guys, and so he's kind of gone to the next level of hobby, fun, and collecting. He's gone professional. But we used to just be mid-20s guys who were in the Navy, getting out of the Navy, chasing autographs outside of Petco Park because it was so accessible. And so somehow we got on this conversation, autographs, different things, this back and forth. And this guy, he mentions a detail to me that, again, I'm mid-40s, so it was easy to catch, but he mentions a detail and he goes, yeah, I had to take out more insurance on my house. And that's a huge flag, isn't it? Right? You caught that? So there's something going on in this hobby conversation that he has that is valuable, right? And so I stopped and I was like, hey, what? And he looks at me. I had to take out more insurance on my house because I have some valuable items. And you could tell he was nervous telling me this, and at the same time, I could also tell he was itching to tell me this, okay? And so I was sitting there, and I go, well, what do you got, bud? And he looks at me and he goes, I got a Mantle rookie. And I go, what? And he looks at me and he goes, I've got a Mickey Mantle rookie card. And I was like, well, which one are we talking here, bud? Are we talking the Topps or the Bowman? And he goes, I've got the Bowman. And so if you know the difference between the two, the Topps is the white whale of the collecting industry. I don't know a ton about baseball cards, but I do know that the 52, I think it's the 52 Topps, is Mickey Mantle rookie card is the valuable rookie card, the high dollar one. We're talking way up there. And the Bowman one is a high valued card. It's not as high valued as the Topps card. And so this is from years of collecting as a kid that even I know this. And so I was sitting there and I said, man, well, is it graded? And so if you know the industry these days, that they have a grading system that if you send it into Beckett, any of these card companies, Beckett seems to be the one, BGS, Beckett Grading Service, that they will go over it with a fine-tooth comb. You have to pay them, let's say $20 a card, but they'll go over it with a fine-tooth comb and they will give it a grade on a scale of 1 to 10 on how great that is, with 10 being the most perfect card you can get. Then they take that card after they grade it, they put it in, they call it a slab. So they put it in a case that they seal, then they serial number the card, and then they register it in their database. So if you have a perfect 10 card, you might end up being one of 5 perfect 10s that ever exist in that 1 year. So it just creates these tiers of limited availability or scarcity regarding the cards, and then they document that. And so it actually creates a multiple tiered scaled system that potentially you could have a card that is incredibly valuable because it is the most limited in that one field. So I'm rambling about that. I'm just giving you some more details about all that grading stuff. But in the end, this gentleman tells me, no, I don't want to get it. I'm just nervous about getting it graded. Right? That does sound fair, because most likely it's an old card. I mean, obviously it's an old card from 52, I think it's 51, 52, or 53, somewhere in there, 1951 would be, or I think it was Mantle's official rookie year was, I think, 1951, but 52 was his official full year when they released everything. So I believe that's right, but I'd have to look back on the back of a card or just pull his stats up. But some of you know more about Mickey Mantle and the anomaly that he was, back in the Yankees. I mean, just an absolute monster. In fact, this year, I don't know if you know this, but Mantle had the record for most switch hitter home runs in a single season. And I believe he was at 54 or 56 in a single season. And the catcher from Seattle broke that record this year and broke 60 home runs as a switch hitter. So officially first time in 60, 70 years, a Mantle record has been broken in a long time. So that a little random fact about that this year. But anyways, this gentleman tells me he's got a Mantle rookie that he's nervous about getting graded. And so it made sense once I heard that. He said that they were family heirlooms, that he had inherited them from his father. In fact, went on to say that he's got an incredible collection. He's got a 41 Joe DiMaggio, a 1941 Joe DiMaggio. Man, or was it Joe DiMaggio? That timeline doesn't sound right for Joe DiMaggio, but I think maybe it was a 41 Lou Gehrig or something like that. But it was one of those two. But he said he had a card from 1941, which, add 15, 16 more years, and that is a 100-year-old card. Let that process right there. 1941, in 16 years will be 100 years. That's incredible, to think that that's how close we're getting to, the turnover of some of these cards and the timelines like that. But I thought that was a really cool conversation. It opened up some old thoughts in me. Again, I'm seeing, I don't know if you ever collected baseball cards, but they used to have a Beckett, was the price guide, the Beckett price guide. And it would come out every month, and it would have all the prices of all the cards. Let's say you bought the baseball Beckett monthly, and that would have all the baseball cards. They would update them over the, keep the database updated. It would have an arrow going up showing you it was a hot card, or it might have an arrow going down that it was a cold, it was, losing some of its speed and momentum. But you could go back and you could look at all the way back to, I think the early 40s, it seems like mid 40s, that they would have cards listed. And it would be the size of, a Sports Illustrated type magazine, but they would have cool covers on them, your favorite. I can see Frank Thomas, King Griffey Jr., Cal Ripken on the cover of those things that, and seeing the prices, looking back at those. So they were fun. They would have articles about collecting. So it was a fun, $3, $4, $5 that you could spend and kind of stay caught up on the industry, stay current. But having this conversation with this guy this week really explored those ideas in my head. I could see old cards, things that I used to consider valuable. I remember one time my dad got excited about collecting from a money standpoint. He thought, that this would be a cool investment to have one day, because his era of cards, the Mantles and all that stuff, they were having value now. They were very limited release, mass produced, but very limited release. You only had 1-2 brands. You might have had some tobacco cards, some different things that were floating around. But technically, there were only about 1 or 2 brands that you really chose from. And so it would limit how much you could really how much money you could blow in the industry. Where now it's a wide industry, and you can really sink some money into these things. But my dad got excited one time, and for about probably 2 years, and we would go to card shows. We would look up in the back of that Beckett, or we would look up in our local newspaper and see what events were going on in the back, in the classifieds, local events. And we would go to baseball card shows around the Houston area every once in a while. Not a lot of them. If I remember looking back, we probably went to like 5, 6 card shows over the course of that time. And we would go in there and we really wouldn't spend a lot of money. I remember we went to one card show where my dad bought a couple things for himself, some better quality cards, some long-term kind of investment things that he wanted or he thought would be good, talking with the vendors. And I remember I was a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old. And so if you ever been to a baseball card show, it's amazing. You walk the aisles, they might have, you could go to a big one, at a convention center that might have 100, 500 vendors, or you might go to a local hotel conference room that might have 25 vendors or 15 vendors. And so I remember going in there and walking around, and they all have games. They all have cards on display. Well, they don't all have games, but some of them have like games where you roll dice, or you might spin a wheel, you pay $1 and it's gambling, right? It's gambling for kids, but the reward, the payout is something card related. So I remember going up to a booth one time, and I think it was $1 to buy in, and you rolled 3 dice. And he had the board, and each slot, had a different reward with some of the dice not paying. If you could roll a gap. So he probably had like 12 total rewards that you could win out of 3 dice. And with the top prize being triple sixes, and if you rolled triple sixes on 3 dice, you got the top prize, which at that time, this would have been like 1992, somewhere around there. But the top prize at the table was a Jose Canseco 1986 Donruss rookie card, which at the time was a very premier card. I want to say that card was worth almost $200, if I remember. I think it was $180 for a long time that thing held value at $180. And so I was sitting there, and of course, they might have had a pack of cards as your triple ones, triple two, triple, all the different kind of things. If you roll a full house or whatever it is. And so I remember it was $1. I had some dollars in my pocket. I used to fundraise and raise money. I would sell baseball cards on the side of the road. I would mow lawns. Whatever I had to do to come up with some bucks if I knew a baseball card show was coming up. And so I had some dollars in my pocket, and I remember this one was $1 to play. And I remember I rolled the dice, and I got a Jeff Bagwell, I think it was a 1991 Upper Deck rookie card. At the time, I want to say that was like $8. And so I thought, hey man, I like this. If I remember correctly, I probably rolled again with another $1, got maybe a pack of cards or something simple, but didn't deter me from playing. And I remember I walked around, I thought it was kind of cool having something like that, and I'd done well with the Bagwell card. And then being in Houston, that was the perfect card to have at the time, right then. And so I remember walking around and not really wanting anything else. And I remember thinking, I'm going to go back there and roll one more time. And I walked back over there, and I rolled triple sixes, and I won that $180 Jose Canseco card. And the whole place, it was a smaller hotel convention center. Maybe, I'm trying to count around the room, probably something like 10, 12 vendors or something like that. And the whole place just erupted, because I was screaming, I was excited, I was blowing up, oh my God, I won! And I got it, and it was in an inch thick case. It was screwed. I mean, I was, wow. And I remember just being so, man, I won. And I backed away, I won my prize, I went to go find my dad, and I remember a guy stopping me and goes, man, I'll give you $100 for that thing right now. And I go, no, man, it's worth more than that. And he kind of laughed, patted me on the shoulder, and I walked off and went to my dad. And of course, we were all blown away that I'd won that, and went home, and that was the top card that I had in my collection for years. I mean, that was a very valuable card. Well, then Jose Canseco comes out and steroids and writes his book, which is an interesting book. I don't know if you ever read it, but Jose Canseco's book was not, it's just trash reading, but if you wanted to know more about what he said about baseball and steroids in baseball, he had a vantage point, and he named names, according to Jerry Seinfeld, he named names. And so, but that thing plummeted in value. It was not a gradable type of card. It was not gonna, because I could even see stuff, small fringes, that would have just not made it perfect or anything like that. But that card, I think today is probably worth like $2 or $4. That era of 80s and 90s is just a mass-produced, low-quality control type of era, and so just is what it is. And we just didn't value those cards the way that they're currently being set aside. But that was a fun win for me, and a fun baseball card, interaction this week. Let's see. Other than that, I'm trying to think if anything else really went on. I think the other thing I was going to talk about this morning was I've noticed a haircut kind of gaining more traction in the young to middle-aged crowd. And when I say young, I'm probably going to say 20 to 50-year-old crowd. But I am noticing, I wouldn't call it a mullet, but it's definitely a mullet faux hawk kind of thing, haircut that is emerging probably among what I would say is about 40, somewhere in the 40s dads, it seems like, which when it starts appearing in dads, that means usually their kids are going to get that same haircut as well. But I was thinking about this morning when I was making notes, that I'm kind of noticing a trend with this mohawk, faux hawk haircut among dads. I probably have some sort of version of it right now, but if you ever see a mohawk or a faux hawk on a barber, it's usually because we just don't want to fade the back. Okay, I'm cutting my own hair. I just buzz off the sides, nip those off real quick. And then the tail doesn't really matter to me because I don't really care. I don't want to line up my neck. I don't want, I'm just being lazy, just so you know. And so usually if you ever see me with a mullet, or something along those lines, that's why it's happening. But if you turn the head, the side profile, and look at the profile of the head side from the side, it's not your standard mullet where it creates the window just above the ears. What I'm seeing, and what I'm even pushing based on the pictures that I'm getting to see, is guys are doing something skin through just above the ears, and then that skin portion tends to tuck back right behind the ear. Let's say you do skin. If you take your fingers and hold up two fingers, right, and just hold them up together like you're a little Boy Scout. Take those two fingers, press them to your ear on the side of your head, right above, like if you were putting on glasses. Make those the glass frame. And let's say that portion on the side of the head would be skin, and then fade it up from there. And then you tuck that skin portion in directly behind the ear, right into the hairline. It just naturally is going to fall in. And then you're fading that portion in, whether from skin or from a shadow, but then you're leaving a tail, but you're leaving about a 2-finger width kind of runway all the way down just above the ear and down, and then kind of making that your start, but then you're not completing your fade all the way around the back. You're leaving the meat of the hair, the tail, just below the occipital bone behind your head. You want to leave that full, and that fills out a profile based on certain lengths. It kind of makes a more flat profile in the back instead of, some of those head bumps, head bones, things like that that kind of play into how the haircut finalizes itself and presents itself. But I've noticed this haircut probably about 4 months. But I had a mom come in and she's referencing other dads now, which usually I don't always see it as the dads being the setters. But right now it does seem like that mullet faux hawk kind of haircut with a nice presentable length, let's say 3-4 fingers on top, left in length. So what would that be? Give or take 3 inches in length left on top with a nice tight profile on the side. Whenever you're looking at them straight on from a full face profile, you can't see that tail unless it's long. So it's a very hidden, it's a discreet mullet faux hawk kind of thing, but the tails that guys are leaving on them are definitely getting more to what I would say is more of a mohawk kind of length. But at the same time, that I'm also a 44-year-old barber, so I may not be the best point of reference on what's trendy and but I'm noticing that right now. So if you were just bored looking up online, to kind of see and match what I'm talking about here, you'd be looking for something in a faux hawk. But you'd want a faux hawk, and then you'd want to kind of specify something 2025. Okay, instead of looking for a faux hawk 2003, there's going to be a different profile to that. There's going to be different lengths that are present. There's going to be a different tightness. There's just going to be modern tweaks that kind of land and present that slightly differently. And then, another thing that I'm noticing in the barbershop that I was last, and I'm going to finish with this being my final point today, but another thing that I've noticed in the barbershop that I was last to the table about was this texture powder. So it's a new product. It's a product that's out there. It's not new, but it's definitely, I have not seen it materialize like this in the barbershop in my 15 plus years of barbering. I haven't seen it this way, but texture powder, it's an inexpensive product that these young guys are using to get that messed up, mussy kind of look. It goes with that alpaca, the broccoli, all of the things that people have made fun of, or they make jokes of, make memes about, these loose presentations, non-structured, non-combed, kind of a non-conformed look. But texture powder has been what I've been using and what I've been introduced to use to get that look. And if you're at home looking for this online, just look up texture powder, or we do have texture powder in the barbershop. But at the same time, look it up online. It feels like, I don't know what's actually in it, but when I use it, it feels like I've been working with drywall on my hands. That's what it feels like. I don't know, I know I'm showing my age when I make a reference like that, but if you've ever worked with drywall, that's what it feels like, man. It dries my hand completely out. But if you're gonna use it, and I have a combed over look on top of my head, and I like using texture powder. It doesn't leave it hard, doesn't leave it crusty, doesn't leave it streaky, I don't get the sweat, kind of disheveled look or anything like that. Texture powder, I can kind of sprinkle some in, and that's what it is. You sprinkle it in, and then you kind of brush it through. And I've had really good luck with using that on myself, and at the same time using that at the shop. So if you're looking for a different product, you want something, maybe you've got holiday pictures coming up that are around the corner, and your wife's already warned you to get a white shirt because we're going to do this, and you need some nice jeans. Well, maybe texture powder might be up your alley, that you don't need, especially where we're at in Southwest Colorado. Not everybody does a structured look on top of their head. They do have more loose looks, more beards, things like that out here, especially with anticipation of winter coming up. But you might research texture powder and see if that, is a product that would match up for you. It's inexpensive, and it's something I've had great luck with as of yet. But it kind of wraps up what I was going to kind of chat about this morning. I got to chat about, a couple of deaths in the barbershop this week that impacted us, and we will miss those gentlemen, Mr. John O'Brien and Mr. Wachowski. We'll miss our interactions with them. I know I will. I say we, but just know that I mean me when I say that. And, when I mentioned it to the other barbers, they knew who we were talking about. Both of these guys they go to me. And so, but they knew who we were talking about. And just know that we all feel it a little bit at the shop, especially when good people are taken from us over the course of our life. We feel it too. Got to chat about baseball cards, which was a fun moment, a lot of history in my childhood, and was a great moment getting to chat with that gentleman and just being blown back. I told him I've never had anybody come in here and mention that they had a Mickey Mantle rookie card. I've in all my chairs and stuff like that. It is true. You just never know what somebody's going to tell you, and it can be such an awesome conversation. And so that opened up such a cool door in my head, and an availability to chat with him about that and learn more about him. Because you and I both know, I know who has the rookie card now, and I have other questions after this, that now that I want to know what else he's got in his collection. I want to know if I can see him. Right? Don't you? Wouldn't you want to know that? But let him land in my chair again, and then I can play the card of, hey, buddy, let's say we take a look at that collection, man. Like, I can bring you a 6-pack of beer. Like, let's sit down and chat, man. So that was a fun conversation. Got to tell you about the rain being outside, and I wish I could go in more to that. I love rain. I miss it. I'm from Houston, Texas, and I would say it's the thing that I miss most about Houston is the rain. I don't miss the flooding. I don't miss the mosquitoes. All that other stuff. I don't miss it. But the big warm raindrops, I miss that. And in fact, it sounds like it's letting up, so I might be heading out for a run after this. And then I got to talk about a trend that I'm seeing kind of in the barbershop, and that's that faux hawk mullet among my age group of, let's say, 40-year-old guys. That I'm kind of noticed that. And so I'm kind of expectant that that's going to trickle down more into the kids right now in our area. And so we'll just have to see what happens. But don't look to me as a trendsetter or anything like that. There are people that are out there that are those folks, but I would not say that is the style of barbershop I run. No, I wouldn't agree with that. I think our shop is a quality, classic-based barbershop, with classic styles being the most influential in my craft and what I offer, just classic styles. And maybe one day we can go over that in a barbershop podcast. But, we offer what I would say is classic styles and good conversation. That's and free beer. Free beer goes a long ways. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, man. But free beer kind of goes a long ways. So hopefully you're listening at wherever you're at, and you're having a heck of a morning, heck of an evening, heck of a day. Hopefully it's going well for you. Hopefully we'll get to see you in the barbershop. Next month, we've got Veterans Day coming up on November 11th, Tuesday, November 11th. And every year I close the barbershop to the general public, and I close the barbershop to the general public, and we open it up to veterans only. So if you know a veteran, if you are a veteran, point them in our direction. Tell them to come see us on November 11th. We're going to offer free beer, free haircuts, free pizza. My sister-in-law owns Pagosa Springs Massage Center. She always comes in and does free massages for the veterans all day long. Rosie's Pizza almost always provides pizza for us. They're so kind. We're just happy and thankful to be in the position to be able to offer thank yous in this form to our veterans. So I love doing it. It's my favorite working holiday of the year. It's my absolute favorite working holiday of the year. I'm ex-Navy myself, from 2003 to 2007, and it's the day that I get to say all the jokes. I get to get all the jokes said about me. We get to all laugh. I get to do it the way that I want it to be done. And so I'm happy to be able to serve on that day and to be able to invite you into my home, which is my barbershop, but into what I'll call my home, and offer you what I have. I'm just thankful for the opportunity to live in a country where we have people that still fight and defend our freedoms. And I'm more than happy to offer a day of gratitude. And so me and my staff will be in there. My wife comes in. My mom's getting picked up at the airport, so my mom's going to be there. So we're gonna do this thing. My sister-in-law is going to be there. We're happy to offer you what we have. So thank you so much for listening this morning. This is Cut Up and Listen, a podcast recorded live at Pagosa Springs Barbershop. And if you're watching on the video today, you're going to catch that I am not in the barbershop. I'm actually in my wife's office at home. My daughter likes to sleep in my office, or else that's where I would be. You'd see some guitars and some nonsense in the background. But you got a nice presentation in the background of my wife's room, or my wife's office, and so thank you for listening. Catch us again on Spotify. Catch us again on YouTube. We do have a channel on YouTube. We are trying to expand. Hopefully this is episode 5. We'll get on to episode 6 and move forward with some other ideas. But thank you so much for listening to Cut Up and Listen. Be sure to like, subscribe. Be sure to share. We're so thankful to have you as part of our audience. We'll catch you next time.